Okay. We're gonna start right about now. Hello, everybody. Welcome to RITSec. Let's clap it up for another weekly meeting. Yes. Let me make sure the stream can see us. All right, cool. Let's get right into it. Change slide, please. Thank you. All right, please sign in now. Signin.ritsec.club. This is how we keep track of who shows up to meetings. You need to do so to get pizza as well. Please sign in. It really helps us out, and it helps you out as well. Let's move on to announcements. Yeah. Join the Discord. Please join the Discord. This is where you can talk to people, talk to interest groups, just chill. See our really good meme chat, as well as any announcements that get posted, so you can keep up to date on all the happenings of every interest group you want to see, and also the club itself. Cool. We have a calendar, calendar.ritsec.club. You can, if you want to just look at a calendar instead of waiting for the announcements, you can keep track of upcoming events, when interest groups meet, and anything like that. So make sure to take a look at that. We have a mailing list. If you like that nice newsletter you get every week telling you the presentations that are going to happen, the education topic, and any upcoming events. That's mailed at ritsec.club. Yeah, make sure you subscribe to that. We have a feedback form. If you would like to give any feedback anonymously for suggestions, things we could do better, or just literally anything you can think of and you want to tell us about anonymously, we have a feedback form, feedback.ritsec.club. So make sure to use that if you want. Cool. ShmooCon. I know I talked about this last week, but we have Shmoo as a Student Part 1. So this is actually, ShmooCon itself runs their own scholarship program for ShmooCon, basically, where they'll pay for your tickets and they'll give you a stipend for lodging and travel. This is called Shmoo as a Student. I think Enzo's coming up to take the mic from me, but I'm just going to keep talking anyways. Sure, just go ahead. I got it, apparently. And then we have our own RITSec Shmoo as a Student as well. This is for anyone who applied to the actual ShmooCon Shmoo as a Student and was not accepted. So please apply to the actual ShmooCon one when you can. And if you don't get it, make sure to apply to ours as well, just because we want everyone to go to ShmooCon who can. Yes?
It says you can only apply for your undergrad. What about graduate student?
I don't think it matters.
It specifically was in the bold.
Oh, for the ShmooCon one?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind. Apparently you can only do it if you're undergrad, but we'll talk about that. We'll follow up with maybe a fix to that. You got things to say? You got things to say for ShmooCon.
Okay, so in the coming week or so, coming up on November 14th, that's when this closes, the Shmoo as a Student closes. On that day, November 14th, the tickets are released at a certain time, and tickets usually sell out in, I think it was 17 seconds last time they did this. So we're going to, more information on this later, but we're going to gather as many people as possible in the labs and then spam F5 and then get as many tickets as possible. And then anyone that gets a ticket, you can sell it back to us and we will pay you for it, just because we're trying to gather as many tickets as possible in order to go to ShmooCon. So more information coming on ShmooCon, on buying the tickets, going. And if you have any questions about ShmooCon at all, great experience, please ask us. So, thank you.
Thank you for those additions, Enzo. Yeah. We need your money for your merch. If you filled out the order form to buy merch, we are collecting payment. We prefer cash but we also don't have change very often. So make sure if you bring cash, you don't need change because it might be hard. We do have a backup Venmo if you need it, but we really prefer cash if you can. So please, we will reach out to you, or you can come to us first, and we will make sure that you get marked as paid, and you will get your merch. Cool. WeSys Friendsgiving. So WeSys is doing a little Friendsgiving meetup at on November 17th. This is at Chris's house, right there. If you have any other questions, ask her. This will be like a potluck event and hangout event. I know there's a form posted in the WeSys announcements if you are interested on bringing something and showing up. So make sure to take a look at that for any more information. It's at 6:30 at Chris's house on November 17th. Okay. All right, I'm gonna let Allison talk for this one. Are you there? Oh.
That experience. And so this was one of my promises, but this is kind of the bridge that we have between, being interested in Black team. Make sure that we have a wide range of people who have that knowledge of being on Black team. So please sign up. It's a very, very cool experience. Unfortunately, we are requiring at least one experience having been in Blue team. And we do have a limited number of slots. So signing up does not guarantee a position on the Black Team Junior program, but we're going to make sure to accommodate as many people as we possibly can. So I will also be posting this link in the Discord, so look there as well. And please just let me know if you have any questions and message me on Discord, and I'd be more than happy to answer anything. All right, that's all from me.
All right, thank you, Allison. Let me mute myself on Zoom. All right, cool. So yeah, please look out for that. I'm sure there's an announcement that will go out for that, so you can find the link if you cannot scan this QR code. But yes, Black Team Junior program will be great. Please check that out. All right, clap it up for our sponsors. Let's go. Yeah, cool. All right, well, one final thing. We do have social media. We will post pictures there from our events and stuff like that. So if you want to see that stuff, check them out. All right, and I think that is the end of our announcements. What? No, I know what it is. No, not yet. Nope, no. Anyways, we are moving on to incident response with Evan. This will be the education topic for this week, so clap it up for Evan.
Hey, what's going on? So my name's Evan, and I'll be doing the incident response talk. So a bit about me and why you should pay attention to anything I even have to say. So I do Windows offensive security, but I also do a lot of defensive security. It's what I've done for 4+ years. I've worked at a variety of companies doing security operations center work, incident response, active defense. So I've seen this from a day in the life of hands-on keyboard, looking at incidents versus being told that something's going on and having to respond accordingly, as well as content development for improving security posture. I've seen it, and I've done it, and I'm here to teach you all about it. So on the side, I kind of do car things too, but that's just my free time. So let's get a little started. First things first, a meme or two to start. So yeah, hackers releasing vulns and showing off 0 days when nobody has any idea. Kind of shit that keeps you up at night. Not fun. And then Dave, who wants free money. Always a problem. Users, you have to make sure that you train them right. So, first things first, what is incident response? First things first is we're just trying to establish that something has taken place. We're just trying to establish that, hey, there's been a breach in policy, something's gone wrong, and it needs to be fixed. Then the other half of it is cleaning up the incident, taking care of whatever's happened, making sure it doesn't happen again, and any of the supplementals, so training, policy, so on and so forth. This is not forensics. Forensics and incident response, think of it like a Venn diagram. They both share a big common space, but there are just a few little outliers on the outside that make it kind of different here and there. But forensics and incident response play hand in hand, but they're not exactly the same thing. The whole topic of this talk is just incident response, not forensics. So, first things first, we need to establish some terminology. What is an event and what is an incident? So, first things first, an event. Anything that happens, say like you got Karen visiting Facebook, you got Steve looking to book a couple of rounds of golf. Those are all logs and traffic that gets generated, but it's nothing bad. It's just an event. It's something that's happened in a place at a time. An incident, on the other hand, this is where it comes down to something's happened that's worth responding to. So the exact definition of an incident isn't exactly the clearest, and the reason is because every corporation defines it differently. Every corporation has different policy. There are certain standards to be abided by. So all of this plays into what the definition of an incident is. So you could have a company that could be like, hey, uploading files to Google Drive is a bad thing. And that suddenly categorizes as any file uploads to Google Drive as an incident and something that needs to be responded to. Another company could be like, yeah, Google Drive is fine. That is not an incident. It's now just an event. So the wonderful folks over at NIST and SANS have developed models for us to use. These models, I like the SANS one, the one on the right, a lot better. It's a lot more in-depth. But you can look at these two models like you're comparing the OSI model to the TCP/IP model. In a way, it kind of plays on the same facet where they tell you the same thing, just in a different way. I like looking at both the models because in the end, the NIST model, the one with all the arrows, shows how the cycle actually happens. So going from preparation to doing your detection to contamination, eradication, and recovery to the post-incident activity. It shows how the cycle takes place to get an idea of how everything moves. The SANS model, or pickerel, as it's commonly called, goes a lot more in depth into what takes place at each step, and it separates out identification, containment, eradication, and recovery. So that way it paints a clearer picture. The NIST documentation, so they put out, I think it's like this 100-page document highlighting everything, is really nice. So when you merge the two models and all the content, you really get this broad picture and, granted, in-depth picture of how incident response actually takes hold. So let's dig into pickerel. Why, when we have the simpler model? Well, it's more in-depth. It allows, for the sake of presentation's sake, a much clearer picture and able to talk more about each stage. That's why I like presenting pickerel more than the SANS model. The SANS model more than the NIST model. So, first things first, preparation. This is where you get everything started. This is where you start preparing to handle any form of incident. So, people, incident response, especially at a large organization where you deal with customer data, you have like PCI or HIPAA or FERPA, all these policies, all these guidelines, all these standards you need to follow. Incident response goes far beyond that, where it's like, if something happens, notification of breach data, that falls into legal and compliance, so you may need to get lawyers involved. Let's see here. Breach of personnel data, that's an HR talk. Breach of, once again, customer data. Oh, now you're talking to the social media team because they need to be able to handle the public crowd control, because one big issue, especially when it comes to handling incidents, is public image, public trust. Because not only does this affect your the business running, but this also can affect public perception of the business, public trust in the image. And that can deal a lot more damage than an attack ever could, because if you lose public trust, it'll take you guys a while to gain it back. So you want to make sure that you have the right people knowing the right information at the right time to handle the situation accordingly. So noting down who the people you have to talk to and when is a big part of your preparation phase. Understanding policies, so having like policies in place for how employees interact with data, the contract that they sign stating that, and yes, this, I can tell war stories all about this, is that when you're on a company machine, there's a disclaimer right when you sign in, there's a contract that you sign stating that the company has their full legal right and power to monitor everything you do. My advice to all of you is try not to do personal stuff on corporate machines, because in the end, that stuff's monitored, that stuff's logged, that stuff's tracked. Somebody like me can just sit, be monitoring for events, see something, go on a threat hunt trying to find hidden adversaries in the network, and then come across your personal business. Just don't. Procedures. This comes down to that nice little link I got down there. As an incident responder, as someone who works in a security operations center running a security program, you want playbooks. You want to understand what to do in any kind of event. So let's say, oh no, we're getting DDoS. We're experiencing a adverse employee. Someone was recently fired, but their creds weren't disabled, and now they're back in. What do we do? Define that all in your playbook. So just be like, this is the situation. Get the playbook. And the playbook will have everything, people, contact information, tools that should be used, where to start looking, how to approach the situation. That is all should be written down in your playbooks. Playbooks are not a static file either. They're constantly evolving with technology changes. So as things are going on, new technology gets released, your corporate infrastructure gets built up, new tools get put in, new appliances. Keep your playbook up to date. Comms plan. How are you going to communicate? One common thing is, well, what if an attacker compromises our email? How are you going to communicate with the rest of your team without giving the adversary any kind of indication that you're onto him? Because you don't want the adversary changing tactics midway when you already have leads. You want to be able to track what they're doing and be able to when you do decide to clean up and eradicate them, you can do it swiftly, but you can also hit them effectively. So comms plan. Tools. This falls under the more of what do you have generating your logs? What do you have for analysis tools? This is all the software and appliances that you have on your network to be able to handle these types of events. Training. So doing tabletops, evolving your playbooks, and sending employees off to incident response trainings, defensive trainings, but also training of the employees. Being able to train employees on good security habits, training them on what to pay attention to, how to get a feel for something is suspicious, and if so, how to report it. Your end users are your friend. They're not to be doubted, more or less. They're not to be not trusted, because in the end, their intuition could help you out in finding something that you may have never discovered. Granted, you got to keep them safe and you got to make sure that you have stuff in place to protect them, but always at least take in mind and listen to what they got to say. Next, identification. So we're fully prepared, everything's up and running. Now let's start paying attention and looking for malicious traffic, malicious adversaries, bad processes. So it's all about just understanding your environment. This process goes differently for multiple environments. An example I can give is did active defense at FM Global, and I've also worked at CrowdStrike. Two very different scenarios in running incident response. Here's why. FM Global, it's an insurance company. So if there's something bad, then we know it's bad and it has to be dealt with. Versus at CrowdStrike, being a security company with analysts, people doing reverse engineering, just because we find something bad doesn't always mean it's bad. It's all about finding the bad within the bad, if that makes any sense. So yeah, malware. Oh, but that's going to the reverse engineers. Not a problem. So identification, it's all about just understanding your corporate environment, the environment you operate in, getting an idea of what's normal, what's not, and then building around your detection and reacting to what falls outside of what you've established as normal. So like, let's say you have a user account which is like domain admin, for example. You want to be notified when someone's added to domain admin because there's this whole request process to be added to this group. You need approval from managers and directors. So when someone's added to this group, they have to undergo a change process, but an adversary will target those groups because it's highest priv. So you can set up an alert to be told, hey, somebody added to this, and then you can just go ask like, hey, was Will Smith supposed to be added to this group on this day? And you'll either get back a yes or a no. And if it's a no, then you know you have an incident. Containment. So as the name says, it's all about containing the threat, containing what is going on. So whether it's setting up filtering, stopping processes, changing passwords, your whole goal is to stop the bleeding, to stop whatever is happening, or at least more or less not stop, but you're trying to control. If, let's say, a worm is running rampant through your network, how are you going to isolate that worm? How are you going to stop it from jumping networks, from jumping computers? How are you going to keep it contained so that it doesn't spread? That's all handled here in this phase. Just being able to keep everything controlled. Eradication. This is where you stop it. This is where you start identifying the cause, how it got there, wiping out the artifacts, rescanning for it showing up anywhere else. So containment and eradication, they more or less fall hand in hand with each other because in the end, you're more or less not doing the same thing, but you're approaching the same goal. It's just for logical separation, they've been divvied out, but more or less, it's the same thing, but because you're just controlling, stopping, and blocking for the future in these two phases. Recovery. This is the point to where you've eliminated everything, and now it's more or less, you're just slowly sweeping up the dust. This is just returning to operations. This is just monitoring for what you've seen, and you're starting your documentation. The most documentation, and what I like to call the most important aspect, is lessons learned. Why? Because it's where you document things. You see where you can make improvements. This is the most important aspect, at least in my opinion, because this is where a lot of the more here's what's happened, here, let me write this down. Write down everything. Take notes. In competitions, when people ask me, how do you do the final report? How do you approach it so that you have a good final report? I'm like, take down everything. Take notes of everything. You see an artifact, you see an IP address, you come up with a hash of a file that you think is malicious. Write it down. Write down everything. The more notes you have, the better. Especially when you start diving into, because of legalities and whatnot, and you start having to dive into more of the forensic-y side, or you need to pass stuff off to legal. Having good, solid notes is helpful because then it becomes better evidence to be submitted to courts. It becomes better evidence to send to HR or legal. It just overall makes the work that you've done more applicable because in the end, your deliverable just like in pen testing, is the report, is the information you give. It's not the work you've done, because you could do great forensics work, you could do a great incident response, you could do a great analysis, but it means nothing to those who don't understand what you've done. The only time it means something is if you can present it to them in a logical fashion, in an understandable fashion. But you can get more technical when it's for your internal notes, when you're updating your playbooks, when you're noting down vulnerabilities, noting down artifacts, noting down like interesting places that you've seen persistence. Having your internal notes, keeping your playbook updated is where this also comes into play. It's always making sure that you're aware of new ways of being attacked, new ways of hiding in your system, new avenues that may have gone undocumented by IT that an adversary can move through your network. Lessons learned, at least in my opinion, is the most important aspect. And Daisome, you're actually jumping a bit. Funny you should mention that. That's actually a bit ahead in my presentation. I'm just about to get there. So, here's something important. You want to make sure management is on your side. Management is your enablers. They're the ones that will make sure that you can do your job. And through money, through policy, through everything that a manager does. You want to make sure that you can kind of take control of what's called the sysadmin paradox. Nothing's wrong, what am I paying for? Everything's broken, what am I paying for? You want to make sure that it's like, hey, we're an asset, not something that works against or is an expense. We're an asset that can make the company more productive, that can make the company make more money, save the reputation, maintain public trust, all because of the work we do. So you just want to make sure that management enables you to do your work, gives you the money to buy the tools, to buy the hardware, to pay for the training, so that you guys can work effectively. Also, having the helping hand of the user. Because sometimes you'll be running down logs and you'll come across a point where it's like, I don't know what this is. This is some weird file name. It looks like it could be within our company, but I'm not sure. Let me reach out to the user. That is a tricky scenario to play because you want to make sure that you don't set off the big brother alarm. Because remember, you have all the logs. You can see all the traffic. You can take a user and map out what they've done for the past hour down to the Word document they opened. You don't want to set off that alarm. You don't want to make them have no reason to trust you and to be cooperative. So sometimes you got to go to the user and just be like, hey, I got a alert that this was triggered on this file. Can you just give me a little context? And they could come back at you and be like, oh yeah, it's this internal program we use for doing X, Y, Z. At that point, you're just like, completely valid traffic, checked it off, no problem. All right, now let's start getting a bit technical here. One major thing of note, as an incident responder, you want to make sure that you're able to manage phishing, vishing, SMS phishing, whaling, or spear phishing. I know these terms have gotten thrown around a lot, but they are something that you really have to pay attention to and be prepared for, especially have a good way of getting these reported. Why? Because this is how a lot of major breaches have started. An example, which the cyber range engineer Forrest actually gave a presentation on at the Incident Response Interest Group, which I recommend you all go to, is there was this law firm. It's this big to-do. It's been going on for 30 years, and $10 million are just gone. Just gone. How? Because a lawyer got phished. They got access to his email. He injected himself into the email stream, and then he's just like, oh yeah, no, send that money here. Next thing you know, money gets sent, gone. It's this big debacle, but it all started with a simple email. But it's not always just an email. It could be a phone call, like scammers calling you, trying to get your social security number, trying to get you to send money via like a wire transfer or however else they do it. SMS phishing, getting random text messages, whaling or spear phishing, which is targeting the big dogs, the C-suites, the directors, the upper management. Phishing is something that is really hard to combat. I spent 12 weeks just working on improving the posture, and there was still stuff that I was learning about and adapting to. Phishing is a big problem, and you want to make sure that you have ways of handling it, you have ways of analyzing it, and responding to it, and in the off chance that a user does submit their CRUDs, responding to it and making sure nothing happens. So, one common method of phishing, Office documents, specifically Excel and Word. Most of the time they have malicious macros embedded in them if they're just a random phish. You need to be able to analyze that to be able to see if a user ran it, what's going to happen. Searching for the hashes or any kind of execution artifacts across your domain. They normally start with macros. Office macros are powerful. Like, I've spent time when I've been going through VBA code for macros, and I'm like, wow, macros can do some crazy things. So macros are a good way to start an initial infection. So how do you want to do this? Fun fact, you can open any and all Office documents as an archive. You can just take 7-zip, right-click on a file, and go Open Archive. And you will get, at the start, these files, _rels, Excel, doc props, and content types.xml. This is the foundation of Office documents. So let's say you have a PowerPoint or a Word document, and there's an image in there that you want, like you just want the image. Instead of copying and pasting, you can just open up the file and grab the image. But another thing is, inside these folders is a file that contains all the macros in the file. So any kind of macro code or VBA code that was embedded into the file, you can find and extract. Granted, it comes out in a proprietary format, so it's not easy to read, so you need to use another tool, which OLE tools are phenomenal at what they do. You can take OLE tools and be able to just pluck out that VBA code and then just spend time reversing it. Spend time going through it and understanding what it does so that when you're going to search for this across the domain or your enterprise, you have a couple indicators of compromise to figure out what to do next. Another thing, simple hiding. Most people think they can get away with just being like, oh, yeah, I have this on my desktop. I'm going to hide it by changing its file extension. That doesn't work out too well because there are these things called magic bytes. Magic bytes are always the first bytes in a lot of files, and they describe what the file is. So like in this case, for this JPEG file, the magic bytes are FFD8 FFE0 00104A46. That's the magic bytes of the file. That tells the computer that, hey, this is a JPEG. An example of this was I was watching a talk from a conference, and this incident response team got called in about an employee. They start investigating. They were told that the employee in question was doing some weird things, maybe unethical. They weren't too sure, so they figured they'd have a full-on investigation. So they come to find out that he was hiding Fuzzy Bunnies as a Nickelback album. So for those of you who have had Stackpole, you know what that terminology means. I don't want to say it on stream personally. But anyway, so how they discovered this is through magic bytes. So there are tools that can be used that will go over every file in a file system, look at the magic bytes and compare it to the extension. If they don't match, it will flag those files as, hey, the header doesn't match the extension. This could be of interest. That's how they found it. They found these suspicious video files as disguised as a Nickelback album of MP3s. So simple hiding with magic bytes, bit of an interesting thing. Now, let's talk about some good stuff. SIEMs, or Security Information and Event Management. Useful not only with security, but also IT. Being able to unify all your logs together. Beautiful. Splunk and Elk are two of the bigger ones, always good names. We'll be talking more about, in a couple of slides, all about logging and whatnot, but just introducing you to the idea of being able to just unify your logs together and do a bunch of cool stuff. But now, let's get even better. Let's throw in SOAR. So SOAR, or Security Orchestration, Automation, and Response, now we're really playing into SecOps, or Security Operations, and a little bit of DevSecOps, or Developer Security Operations. Because with SOAR, especially Splunk to Splunk and Splunk Phantom, it works really well together. So you can have data from Splunk get thrown into Phantom and then do a lot of cool automation with it. One example is SIEM ingesting indexing, triggered alert to a case in SOAR to then automation. So SOAR does a lot of case management stuff. So you can take an actual incident, build it into a case, and then be able to merge alerts together, merge indicators of compromise, artifacts, to have it all unified under one case number for easy reference and easy documentation. So let's dive a bit into it. So this is what I put together like mid-afternoon and refined late night is this, because this is beautiful. This is pretty much a description of how all companies should want to run their program, because automation is cool and it's useful when it works. So anyway, logs are your friend. They are. They tell a story. If logging is enabled, you want to make sure you have in-depth logging enabled. PowerShell logging is cool. But it tells you a story. It just talks to you. It's like, hey, we had this user log in. They requested these keys. They did this. They went to this website. Logging is cool. Yes, I know it may sound boring. Oh, reading logs, dates, all of this. It's boring. But in a way, I can see that. But it's also kind of cool, because in the end, you're having the computer tell you a story. You're just sitting by reading a book and you're understanding what's happened. But the main characters are employees. They're adversaries. It's able to paint you a picture of like, oh, cool, the user downloaded this file, then executed, then it did all this stuff. So not only is it cool in the sense of just you're reading a story, but it can teach you some new things. Like when I was at FM Global, I was just monitoring logs, and I'm like, hey, this is a cool way of doing file execution. Something new for your personal books, just by seeing what active adversaries do. But let's get better. Let's start aggregating logs. Send them all to a central server. No need to have to remote into each computer to just generate more logs of like, oh, you did an SSH connection, and then you changed directories, and then you read this file. No. Aggregate them all into one central source. This becomes very important. Get them all in one place. That way you can start doing even better stuff. Correlation. Log searching across the entire enterprise. Because then what you can do is you have all these logs. You have multiple web servers. You have every Linux box with SSH. What can you do with that? Well, using a platform like Splunk, which is the Splunk query language, beautiful. You can do so fine-tuned queries to get exactly what you want and present it any which way you want. It's fantastic. Anyway, so like I want to search all SSH servers for connections from this IP address. Go. And it will. It will give you every log item. You can tell it, give it to me in a table and show me the most servers that were hit. So like server A, server B, server C. Server A was connected to 50 times from this IP. Server B connected 20 times. Server C connected once. And you can get that perfectly listed in a table just so that then you can understand what's going on. So being able to search across the entire enterprise for anything that may be happening is great. Now, alerting. Alerting is so GOAT in essence, is because you can set it up to be like that example I had earlier. When someone gets added to the domain admin groups, tell me. That's what alerts are. Alerts are like, hey, notifying the IR team, somebody got added to this group, better take a look at it. But alerts can be built however you want. You can build alerts off of queries, and next thing you know, whatever you're searching for, so like a rare event, can become an alert, and then with alerts, you can build a variety of triggers. So you could have it do webhooks, you could have it send cases to your SOAR platform, you could have it send emails. It's so nice to just how you can handle getting notified when something important takes place. Anyway, let's see the chat. Yeah, so for those in the Twitch chat, Daisome, yep. So sending stuff to a SIEM is also important because timing. Time is the universal coordinator throughout incident response. You may not be able to coordinate IP addresses, you may not be able to coordinate file names, but time is a great coordinator because it can help you build your timeline. It can help you understand really what's going on at any point. It may not be the best coordinator, but it's the best place to start. So let's get into visualizations, building dashboards, making management happy. So make things pretty and clean. You want to see where all your SSH traffic is coming from? Toss it up on a map. You want to get an idea of like, you've built out your program, you have all these different alert types, alert severities, and you want to get an idea of what has the most volume. Put it all in a pie chart to understand like, oh, level 1 alerts are taking up the most amount of our alert space versus level 4, which is only a small percentage. Again, using these platforms allows for things to be presented in any way, whatever data you want. You want a dashboard for, like, let's say you're using Okta for SSL when you want to map out user logins because you're looking for user teleportation, which is like, you have a user signing in from the United States, and then 2 minutes later, you got a user signing in from, like, I don't know, Ireland or Switzerland. That doesn't make too much sense. That's something to be paid attention to. You can map that all out on a nice chart and be able to go from there. But it also is nice for management because it gives them just a one-stop shop look at how their security program is doing. Where is their money going? What's it being used for? So it allows to be shown what the security program is doing. And again, fully customizable. You can build out as many dashboards as you want, however you want to, and present the data however it seems most relevant. Automating the process. So now let's start wrapping more into SOAR. So let's paint a scenario. It's phishing. So you get alerted that a user has gone to a known phishing site based on your threat intelligence. The site has been identified as an Office 365 phishing page. User gives credentials. Next thing you know, you get the alert. And it gets dumped into a case in SOAR. You convert it from the default of when it enters, of being just like, yeah, is it an incident or not? I don't know, categorize it to saying, it's an incident. This is a phishing incident. Next thing you know, based on how you have your SOAR platform set up, is once you make that conversion to an incident, you can have automation on the back end to be like, this is a phishing incident for this user. What next? Oh, let's put in a ticket with IT to make sure that they know about it. Let's prompt the user for a password change, all automatically. So that way, it's like, okay, cool. We know the user is going to be prompted at next login to change their password. They've gotten an email saying we've recognized that you've and have reached a known phishing site, and as such, these precautions are being taken. You will be prompted for a password, and the IT team has been notified. All of that done just by you telling the SOAR platform it's an incident. So that's what makes SOAR so beautiful, is just that a lot of the more tedious processes can all just be handled by a workflow with SOAR. So that way, you can really focus on mitigating the incident, figuring out what actually happened, and dealing with the more technical stuff and the documentation, and just let all the more tedious or like more busy work side just get handled out by the automation. So let's also talk traffic, because sometimes you may not get all the information you need just purely by logs on a system. So you can have systems such as, I think the name, if I remember correctly, is Riverbed. That's a NetFlow capture tool that can just pay attention to traffic. Another one is Zeek or Bro. That's another really useful tool for just monitoring network traffic. That helps to paint a bigger picture because it allows you to see like not only just what the computer sees, but what's going on over the wire. That data can also be piped into your SIEMs. It can allow to be correlated and indexed and painted into dashboards. So traffic capture's definitely a big thing. But what's cool is, let's say you've isolated down to a laptop and you know it's got something active running on it. You can just either have whatever port it's connected to spanned, which is port mirroring at a switch, or you can use what's called like a shark tap, which is just a little box that you plug Ethernet cables into. Two cables, one comes from the device in question, the other goes to a switch or a router, but the third one allows you to tap that connection and listen in on Wireshark. So what's cool is you can take Wireshark and you can get a couple of nifty graphs, you can get counters, flows, you can get communication tables so you can see all the IP addresses and MAC addresses that a device has been communicating with, but you can also feed it credentials, keys, and other authentication things to be able to decrypt traffic. But one of the coolest parts is you can just have it export objects. So like files being sent in stream. Sometimes you may have to manually carve them out of the data. Other times, Wireshark will do it for you. It'll just be like, hey, I found this data being transmitted over SMB. We have all the packets to do so. Let me just give you a list, and you can just save whatever you want. It's protocol dependent for obvious reasons, but it's another great tool to have. Some reversing skills are good too. Remember, incident response is a cat and mouse game. You're always playing back and forth. You're trying to figure out like, hey, where are they going? What methods are they using? What tools? So you're constantly going back and forth. So to be able to do some form of reversing, not full-fledged analysis. We're not cracking open Ghidra and we're not taking the full, the full assembly of it. That's not our concern. Our concern is gaining indicators of compromise, understanding file hashes, understanding what it's doing, watching it in a live sandbox like Cuckoo Sandbox, any.run, hybrid analysis, heck, even Virus Total gives good information. All of that is good for you because then you have things to search on. You can search for hashes across your enterprise, IP addresses, file names, you name it. If it's an indicator of compromise, you can search it. So it's also needed for cleanup because you need to know what you're cleaning up. But having some basic reversing skills are good. Definitely don't just be like, I'm an incident responder. I don't need to worry about that. You do, because it will just make you all the better. So let's dive into dealing with websites now. So because a lot of things are done online, web apps and such, and you got like Billy Bob Joe who clicks on an ad link, and you're trying to figure out what's going on, what's on the other side. Well, there's one thing in the headers that when you're dealing with the headers, there's one piece of the header that is really nice called the refer URL. This URL can, if it shows up, because sometimes it shows up, sometimes it doesn't, is often telling you where you've been last. So like let's say google.com to yahoo.com. The refer when you go to Yahoo would be Google. So this can help you build a path from where you started to where you've ended. Sometimes that's not always the case and you have to just use time to figure that out, but other times the refer URL is there to deal with that information and to just give you a picture. Sometimes if a site has multiple redirects or it has one redirect but loads a bunch, you will see a lot of websites call back to the same refer. Another thing too is the user agent. Sometimes sites will react differently based on user agent. So that's a thing to bear in mind when you're doing your analysis. Is that, hey, it's responding this way on Firefox on Windows 10, but what if I try it on iOS 14 via Safari, send that user agent, you may get a different response. So that's another thing to bear in mind is when you see the traffic from the user and you're like, oh yeah, they are on an iPhone. Try following their path in your analysis from their user agent perspective. That may give you more context as to what they may have actually done. Two good places that I go are urlscan.io and any.run. Speaking of sandboxes, one thing I forgot to mention is whenever you're working on something, you got to be careful because unless you have a privately hosted sandbox or you've built an environment within your corporation to do analysis, sometimes you may have public tasks, and as such, you don't want to risk uploading company data to a public sandbox. That is a big no-no. That could land you in legal trouble. That could expose company secrets. That is a big bad. So it's just like, it's interesting. So bear that in mind and be careful. Reports. This is the big thing. This is, in the end, this is what you want to deal with. This is the deliverable. This is what everybody sees. Most important aspect of all this. You want to make sure it's detailed, but based on your audience. So just like with a pen testing report, you have the executive summary. If it's going to see the C-suite, you have it a bit more technical for management. You have it very technical for the people doing the cleanup if that's not you. If it is you, then you don't have to worry about that because you already know the information and you're not presenting it to anybody. So again, bear just in mind who your audience is and who's going to be reading this because one, you don't want to instill Big Brother. Again, that's just the big no-no. You want to make sure that you're talking away to where it's not like you're actively being monitored. No, I mean, when you're in an environment, heck, with even 1,000 employees, nobody's being watched. It's all just our system just paying attention for what's malicious, and it just so happens that your device, even without you knowing, you went to a website and it loaded some JavaScript in the background that you didn't know of, that's malicious. We caught that and we're responding to it. So that's, again, something you want to be careful of. But just pay attention to your audience and make sure to be detailed depending on who you're talking to. But other than that, questions? Thank you.
All right, thank you, Evan, for that wonderful presentation. Before we get demo time started, we actually have an announcement from our very own tech lead, Max.
Yeah, so last we referenced this was a bit ago. This has been a long and ongoing process, and we finally come to a decision. I just want to thank everyone who participated and applied. Thank you so much. I loved working with you all, but it is down to one. And I would like to say congratulations to Alex Beaver. Please come up. Come on. We have the ceremonial RITSEC tech lead hat. What is it? Lids decided to tell me that it takes 2 days and $25 to put a PNG on a hat, so I told them no. So I will be getting them an actual one that's just mine, but ceremonial. Yeah, I'm looking forward to working with you, man. As well. Thank you. Yeah, and then I'll go over it. And so demo time. I did not release demos yet. I'll put them up. There's going to be no actual VM today. So incident response, we're going to be doing some incident response type challenges. And then at the end, we're going to be making an IR report, just because that's pretty much what IR is. Yeah, I'll be putting everything up in a second. Yeah, that should be all.
All right, thank you. We will be, for everyone watching on the stream at least, we will be back at 2 o'clock with our research talks. For now, we were going to just go to demo time, enjoy demo time. Yeah, we will start research right at 2 because we do have a presentation that needs to be done early. Cool. That is it.